Hi, I'm Veronica, and welcome to the first installment of Bookish News Lately here at the Reading Chronicles. Here is some interesting news from around the web, podcasts, and BookTube over the past month. Starting on a not-so-fun note, an executive order was issued from the President to dismantle the Institute of Museum and Library Services. This requires the agency to reduce their services and personnel to the minimum amount required to operate according to law. While this doesn't directly eliminate the agency, elimination is the ultimate intention. Any future budget requests will be rejected. According to the American Library Association, library funding draws less than 0.003% of the annual federal budget, but has a great impact in communities across the country, including technology classes for job seekers, services for people with disabilities, library delivery for older Americans, and summer reading programs for families. IMLS is the only federal agency that provides funding to libraries. The ALA website has more information on what dismantling the IMLS could mean, as well as ways citizens can get involved to voice their dissent with this action. Most importantly, this includes sending messages and calling state representatives to urge them to overturn the executive order. I've called mine, and I'm a super introverted person who hates talking on the phone, but the ALA website and the script they provide make it really easy. All you need to do is enter your information, and they will provide you with the numbers of your senators and representatives to call. If you press the Start Call button, you'll receive a call on your phone from a number that will then connect you with the first congressperson or senator in the list. Just follow the script on the website, personalize it as you wish, and then you're done. Calling 3 offices took me 10 minutes, and it was less painful than going to the dentist. You can also send action alerts or share your story with the ALA about the impact of federal funding on your community. The Libby website, Libby Life, has additional ways citizens can get involved, such as checking out books and digital resources, attending events and programs, and asking your local branch about their needs. To find even more ways to support your local library, visit the website ilovelibraries.org, an ALA initiative. In related but happier news, April 6 through 12 is National Library Week. This year's theme is Drawn to the Library. The ALA says, from young families stopping in for play and story time, to students sketching out their next creative project in a makerspace, to seniors seeking tech help and everyone in between, libraries of all kinds help us connect the dots from one part of our journey to the next. Right now, you can watch the ALA's graphic novel and comics roundtable panel discussion of librarians about organizing comics programming in libraries here on YouTube. If you're a librarian or interested in presenting information on comics in or out of the classroom, this may interest you. On Monday, we celebrate Right to Read Day by championing the freedom to read, the freedom to access information, and the freedom to find community in the opportunities that libraries provide. Tuesday, April 8th celebrates National Library Workers Day, and you can nominate a stellar worker from your library. Wednesday is National Library Outreach Day, celebrating the library professionals who meet patrons where they are. And Thursday is Take Action for Libraries Day, a day to rally advocates to support libraries. Ways to get involved include sending a physical or digital postcard of appreciation to your local library, checking out banned books, registering to vote, reporting censorship, and attending your next library or school board meeting. Next, the Women's Prize for Fiction Longlist was announced. Chair of Judges Kit Duvall describes the nominees as important, far-reaching novels where brilliantly realized characters navigate the complexities of families and modern relationships whilst pushing the boundaries placed around them. It's a list that readers will devour and shows the echoes of world events on everyday lives, as well as the power and brilliance of women writing today. There are a number here that I'm interested in reading, among them The Ministry of Time by Kellyanne Bradley. This is a genre-bending sci-fi, romance, spy thriller, fantasy, and historical fiction about a civil servant working in a new government ministry that gathers expats from around history to test the limits of time travel. Her job is to work as a bridge, assisting the expat 1847, a commander who died in a doomed expedition to the Arctic. However, their working relationship morphs into something more. If I know myself at all, I'll hate the romance part of it, but I'm still interested in reading it. I'm also interested in Alma by Soraid de Silva. This is a multi-generational family saga, my favorite, starting in Singapore in 1951 when, at 10 years old, Josefina kills her abuser. This becomes the defining moment in the lives of Josefina, her daughter, and her granddaughter. Moving from Sri Lanka, Singapore, New Zealand, Australia, and London, the novel is about the history and future of the Sri Lankan diaspora and how the past lives with us forever. All Fours by Miranda July has been getting a lot of buzz. This novel follows an artist who announces her plans to drive from LA to New York. But 30 minutes after leaving her husband and child, she exits the freeway and takes up residence in a motel and begins what turns out to be sort of another quest for freedom. Truthfully, I'm not sure I'll enjoy this book, but the hype does have me interested, so I'll probably give it a go at some point. I'm extremely interested in The Dream Hotel by Leila Lalami. This is a dystopian-type story about a woman named Sarah who is pulled aside at the airport by the Risk Assessment Administration, who use their algorithm to determine from her dreams that she's at risk of harming her husband. This means she must be kept under observation at a retention center for 21 days, except that Sarah learns the rules at the center keep shifting and that stays can be extended, meaning that more than just good behavior will be necessary for her to see her family again. Last, I'm interested in reading Tell Me Everything by Elizabeth Strout. Bringing together characters from her previous works, the novel sees Bob Burgess, Lucy Barton, and Olive Kittredge becoming friends and talking about their lives, as well as people they've known and their hopes and regrets. I've read several of Strout's works in the past, and I always enjoy her quiet stories about the relationships that bind people. She's one of my contenders for a year of authors, so this will certainly be on my to-be-read list in the future. By the time this video is up, the shortlist will have been released, so I'll have a link for that in the description. As a note, links to all of the stories I mentioned today can be found in the description. The prize will be announced on June 12th. On a similar note, the Women's Prize for Nonfiction shortlist was announced. The shortlist includes 1,000 Threads by Nena Cherry, a memoir from this musician, songwriter, collaborator, activist, mother, daughter, lover, friend, and icon. The Story of a Heart by Rachel Clark, about the journey of a heart transplant from one 9-year-old to another. Raising Hair by Chloe Dalton, about the author's efforts to care for a hare during the lockdown days of the pandemic. Agent Zoe, the untold story of courageous World War II resistance fighter Elżbieta Zawaka by Claire Mully, a biography about the only female member of the Polish elite special forces and the only woman to parachute from Britain into Nazi Germany-occupied Poland. This is also a look at the way the history of women's agency in the Second World War is seen. What the Wild Sea Can Be, The Future of the World's Oceans by Helen Scales, about how prehistoric ocean ecology holds lessons for the oceans of today, and offering innovative ideas for protecting coastlines and cleaning the toxic seas. And Private Revolutions, Coming of Age in a New China by Yuan Yang, the first Chinese-born British Member of Parliament who tells the stories of 4 Chinese women striving for a better future in an unequal society. In more prize news, the 60th annual Nebula Award finalists were announced. They include Rakesfall by Vajra Chandrasekhara in the novel category. This is a story about two children who meet in the middle of the Sri Lankan Civil War and who are linked by an act of violence that propels their souls in a journey throughout the ages. Lost Ark Dreaming by Suyi Davies Okungboa in the novella category. This is a dystopian class story set off the coast of West Africa, decades after the rise of the Atlantic Ocean. Why Don't We Just Kill the Kid in the IMLS Hole by Isabel J. Kim in the short story category. This story builds on the classic Ursula K. Le Guin story, The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas. And nominees for the Ray Bradbury Award in Outstanding Dramatic Presentation include the Netflix show Chaos about vengeful Greek gods. Are there any other kind? And the movie musical Wicked, based on Gregory Maguire's recentering of The Wizard of Oz on the Wicked Witch of the West. And the first Climate Fiction Prize shortlist has been announced. The prize celebrates the most inspiring novels tackling the climate crisis and aims to use great stories to support societies to fully grasp the climate change threat and to embrace its solutions. The 5 nominees are The Ministry of Time by Callie-Ann Bradley, And So I Roar by Abby Dare, Briefly Very Beautiful by Roz Deenan, Orbital by Samantha Harvey, and The Morningside by Taya Obrecht. The Nobel Prize on YouTube published the official interview with Hong Kong, last year's winner for literature. Among the questions she answers are, what did books mean to you as a child? What made you decide to become a writer? Can people work on their imagination? And how can people make a positive impact on the world? To the last question she responds, you have this ability to feel the interior of another one. It is a very precious ability. I believe this ability is important to understand the world and understand the meaning that we are human and the meaning that we are living together in this world. I believe it is this ability to feel the interior of other people, even though they are far away or even though you don't know them personally. Elsewhere on YouTube, Shelley of Book Chats with Shelley discusses reading as a privilege in and of itself. She says that reading is seen as a means of escape, but not everyone can afford to be a bookworm, whether it's due to the rising cost of books, hardback, paperback, or digital, or other systemic barriers. For some people, spending money on books is a luxury, and some children don't own a single book. In referencing articles that put forth the harrowing fact that some college students admit to never having finished a book, she poses the question of, when we talk about people not having the capacity to read books in terms of anti-intellectualism, is it really about a lack of access? Other ideas she discusses are that children who don't have access to books are more likely to struggle academically and less likely to read for pleasure. Book ownership is a predictor of reading performance and long-term educational success. This is why it's so important for our libraries to continue to be funded so that books can be accessible to everyone regardless of income. And Shelley so rightfully brings attention to this fact. The ability, the desire, and the time to read are 100% privileges. The statistics on this are 20 years old, and I doubt they've improved, but the National Endowment for the Arts to Read or Not to Read report that I used for my master's thesis presented data on the reading habits of Americans. They found that the average reading score for high school seniors had declined, falling to little more than 1/3 reading at a proficient level. Even among college graduates, reading proficiency had declined by 20%. This was disconcerting because the NEA's previous report, Reading at Risk, found that the percentage of people who read rose with both the level of education and family income. The highest percentages were those with a graduate degree and earning $75,000 annually or more. Reading levels also rose based on the level of parents' education, with again the highest reading levels among those with parents who had a graduate school education. Of course, there are many other factors, but it's hard to overlook the strong correlation between socioeconomic status and education level that point to both as being strong influences in a person's desire and ability to read in their free time. As Shelley says, reading should be a right, not a privilege. Next, LitHub held their inaugural Ides of March Madness bracket, pitting literary villains against each other and inviting readers to vote to determine who is the evilest one of them all. Among the brackets were Nurse Ratched from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Miss Trunchbull from Matilda in the Authority Figures category. Miss Danvers from Rebecca and Mr. Rochester from Jane Eyre were in the Manipulative Bastards category. Suburban Ennui from Revolutionary Road and Rufus Whalen from Kindred fought against each other in the Monsters and Boogeymen category. And Satan from Paradise Lost and the Kid from The Giving Tree fought against each other in the Anti-Villains category. You can read about all of the villains in the linked article, as well as hear Emily Temple and James Folta discuss the selection with Drew Broussard in the March 6th episode of the LitHub podcast. The greatest villain of all time has been crowned, and, spoiler alert, it wasn't Satan. Tony and Andy from the Lifeonbooks podcast discuss whether Gabriel Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude is the best book adaptation of all time. Do the magical realism elements work on screen? How do they manage to keep track of all of the characters with the same name? How do they handle the passage of multiple generations and the use of multiple actors to portray the characters at different ages? They discuss what they like most about the show, watching subbed versus dubbed, and that they hope they don't have to wait years for the second part to come out. Spoiler alert on my opinion, yes, this is the best book adaptation of all time. I read 100 Years of Solitude for the first time last year. I hesitate to say first time because I did try to read it one time before in Spanish, but my level wasn't high enough, and I tried to listen to the audiobook while reading, and it went too fast, and I didn't understand anything, and I hated the book. I teach English to adults, and I have a student from Colombia who told me that the book was being adapted for a Netflix series, and this was the kick I needed to finally read the book. So I did. I read it in Spanish. I took it slowly. I read 10 pages a day. It took me about 2 months to get through it, but I absolutely fell in love with it. And I'm so glad that I put in the effort to read it, because the adaptation on Netflix absolutely captures the voice and the feeling in the book. And it was exciting to see those characters and their stories translated to the screen, while also maintaining that ethereal feeling that runs throughout the generations of the Wendia family and everything that happens to them over the years. It's a difficult book to describe because so much happens, but it's a beautiful book and one that is well worth the effort. I also hope we don't have to wait for years for part 2 to be released. Season 3 of Yellowjackets, the maybe it's supernatural, maybe it's Maybelline show about a girls' soccer team who crashed in the Canadian wilderness, is in full swing. Unfortunately, I don't have Showtime or Paramount Plus, so I haven't seen it and will need to do the whole subscribe for a month and binge it thing, but I did somewhat recently catch up on season 2, which means that I could finally listen to the Yellowjackets WTF podcast season 2 episodes. Of bookish note is that regular hosts Wendy and Jason are joined by Wendy's daughter Cassie, a 9th grade English teacher, to discuss the obvious comparisons between the show and the classic school read Lord of the Flies by William Golding. They discuss the symbolism of face masks, comparisons between Ralph and Natalie, whether Lord of the Flies would be different if girls had been present, how truth changes depending on context, particularly the context of fear, Simon as a combination of Lottie and Laura Lee, whether Misty is really piggy, and the misguided and frequently offered opinion that Lord of the Flies just wouldn't work if they had been girls. Last is a tip from Libby on their Skip the Line feature. You might sometimes notice a four-leaf clover next to a title, and this means you can skip the line for that book. These are special copies of titles that usually have longer wait times, and it means that the library can lend them more quickly. These books don't have wait lists, but they can't be renewed. They may have shorter loan periods, and there may be a limit as to how many you can borrow at one time. You can also search for books using Skip the Line as a filter. It looks like the Denver Public Library, where I am, doesn't offer this, but if you use Libby, it's worth checking your app to see if sometimes you can get books you want right away. That's all for this month. What interesting stories did I miss? Let me know in the comments. I hope you read well.